before I begin and introduce the panelists, just by way of a background, this event, as I said, it's how to use data science to help you grow. And it's really looking at data science and AI. As we know, they're both more and more prevalent in our everyday life. Chatbots in customer service centres, virtual customer assistants such as Alexa have all driven into our consciousness. And now it's hit the mainstream. I think it's fair to say all of us, kind of organisations, whether B2C or B2B organisations, are looking, how can we leverage these technologies? How can we leverage these approaches to help our organisations and use them to help us grow revenue? So one of the things we'll also be discussing as part of this, some AI tooling and an insight engine that we've developed called Actionable Insights. So the main draw of this, it effectively allows people who aren't data scientists, so business managers, sales people, marketing, allows them insights and to make actions so they can find out where their next customer's coming from, who to call, when to contact and reach out to people, things like that. And the insight engine we've built, it actually uses fundamental AI technology such as graph analytics at its core. And it's something we'll talk about today. So just to give a very high-level overview, graph analytics, basically, it allows the exploration of relationships between entities such as organisations, people, transactions. In short, shows how things are connected and how relevant they are to each other. And we look at leveraging that sort of technology. But that's just at a high level, as I say. I'll now go to the gallery view and bring out and start an introduction to all of our panellists. So Julian, I know Julian was having connection issues, so we'll come to Julian last. But Tim, if I can start with you.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tim Drye. I'm chairman of a group called the Data Analysts User Group, which we've been running since 1998. And we bring together commercial data analysts from across a wide set of different sectors, including financial services, retail, utilities and leisure in particular. And together we then liaise with government, academia. We look to develop new data sources and techniques, and in particular campaign for the role of talented people in analysis. And I'm also co-founder and head of innovation at Lumilinx, and get asked to be on a whole variety of different advice boards, including advising the ICO and the DMA and Data IQ, for example. So hopefully I can give you some relevant advice today too. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And George?
Hi, good afternoon. So I'm George Sosolopoulos, founder and CEO at Cinetech, a consultancy, and we help our customers with using data science to enrich the organization. Really interested to talk about some of the use cases today.
And Gary?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Hey all, I'm Gary Cole, co-founder of Lumilinx. Effectively, we are a data science business producing marketing insights. Our role is around strategy, sales and marketing predominantly, but we work in a whole bunch of sectors, insurance, logistics, those type of things. So effectively, we've got data scientists and theoretical physicists that do some clever things with data.
So I should just say, before I introduce Julian, so Cinetech and Lumilinx, we are partners. So Cinetech, we provide a lot of kind of integration and software development services, as well as on the data science side, and support by Lumilinx, who provide a lot of the raw data scientists, if you like, and the analytics. And together we kind of work with organizations to integrate the data science, the algorithms and things into systems. So it's not just standalone reports, it's actually like our actionable insights, it's actually integrated into your CRM system and things like that. So it's actually part of how you work day to day. And finally, sorry for that interjection, but I'll just introduce Julian. If you're there, are you okay to introduce yourself? No, that's fine. So I'll just give a 30 seconds. So Julian is head of marketing for ESET. They are a cybersecurity software provider, and he's here as an end user, as it were. So ESET work closely with us and are providing and are utilising our services to help their organisation and help form some of their online campaigns and things. Hopefully, Julian will be back when it comes round to the end user example and things. Otherwise, I'll probably call Tim and Gary in to talk about it. But hopefully, Julian will be back. So just, I guess, Gary, if we start with you, as someone who's in the front line talking with customers every day about AI, it'd be good to hear, because there's been a lot of advancement in mainstream news, such as driverless cars and other things like that around AI. But a lot of those don't seem real and aren't things necessarily a lot of us can implement in the day-to-day in our organisation. So can you perhaps contextualise what the latest advancements mean and how companies like ours can use it?
Yeah, great. And I'll stay fairly high level, and I'm sure Tim will expand further. But effectively, you gave some good examples, and there's a tendency to have a yawn culture around AI because everyone's kind of strapped it to their name to increase their value or to increase their marketing reach. I think that the most important thing to realise is effective market, and the data market is moving faster. And there's a piece on data relevance. For a long time, the big data strategies took hold after the move to cloud. And then people kind of started to realize, well, we've got this data. What do we do with it when we've got it? And effectively, what artificial intelligence is a big, broad topic enables you to do is to move faster. And the worry is, if you don't move faster, then competitors will. And one things that we see is companies moving away from a one-off kind of data transformation piece of work, or a one-off buying data, external data to enrich theirs, and actually moving to the point where they can visualize their data and they can question data depending on their strategic business direction. So effectively, I think that when people talk about AI, I think really as a broad term, people are actually talking about how do they make the data in their organization and how do they enrich it, but how do they do it in a way that actually facilitates, their everyday user, whether it be a CMO, a salesperson, a sales leader, or the board to make strategic decisions. It's certainly something that I talk about as it's a journey, not a one-off activity. And something I always point people to is the analytics adoption curve. If you can simply Google it, but I'm sure Andrew can send something out afterwards. If you look at it, there's a lot of business intelligence roles which are really taking historical data and giving you really good hindsight. And then you kind of come into this area of, okay, what's the next forecast look like? And there's a tendency to average or means out data, which actually then doesn't give you as much foresight or the predictive, prescriptive type of work, i.e. what should I be doing as a business? And I think that all of those things wrapped together enable you to make decisions faster. And I think that's what you're going to see in the next 2 to 3 years, particularly in the data world.
Okay, thanks. There's some great insight there. And George, can you elaborate on this and just give some ideas of how data science being adopted amongst your customers and the main challenges they're typically trying to solve with this?
Yeah, a lot of our customers are in financial services, and I think so. One of the areas there has been the improving investment decision making. So that kind of follows on from what Gary was saying a moment ago. So if you just dive into that for a second, a traditional long-short fund manager would be looking to really understand a relatively small universe potentially of companies that they would be they'd know everything about, and then they would be able to invest in those companies based on knowing absolutely everything about them and being able to sort of know more about them than what the rest of the market did. So if you think about the opportunity to find a good deal is actually limited by the size of your universe, the concept of bringing data in and additional data points to increase the size of your universe and to more effectively look through those data points to make better decisions, and that's huge. The potential of that is absolutely huge, not only for for the companies that we've been working with, but for the investors into them. So, to give you a very sort of quick example of that, one of our companies is an investment manager. They have quite a lot under management, pension fund money, and they were looking to invest in a supermarket chain in an emerging market. So again, they were able to look at different kind of data points coming from whether it was social media to understand sentiment, sort of population density, sort of competition, all these kind of different sort of more diverse data points, bringing it all to kind of help their decision. So that's the one side of it. And then I would say the other side of it is sales. So retention, working with retention or upselling. So for retention, there's a lot of data that's being gathered, recorded, stored, looking through that and extracting the value to make better decisions again, using that term, to be able to understand kind of, what is the sentiment? What are they, are your customers happy? Are they slightly annoyed? Are there certain indicators that means you need to make some decisions or take some actions in order to make sure you retain them. And finally, I don't want to waffle too much.
George, that did make perfect sense. And Tim, moving on to you. Gary talked about the analytics adoption curve and how AI can be used to establish great practice to uncover new behaviours. Perhaps you could talk through some of the research. I know you've been doing a lot on complexity theory recently. So some of the research you've been doing and what benefits it may have in the commercial world.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm always enthusiastic about talking about this. So having now got hold of huge amounts of data, you start to see that actually people don't behave quite as simply as people thought when there wasn't much data around. And I've focused a lot on the complexity theory. And you might ask, what is it? And that's what I'm here to address. So it's about how do you take account of the fact that people interact with each other rather than just that they've got various attributes. So if I use the current situation as an example, it's clearly important, as we've all been told, how old you might be at the moment. We know that the death rates are significant and astronomically higher if you're older than whether you're younger. But also your ethnic background affects you. Your affluence seems to have an effect, whether you've got a pre-existing condition, as they like to describe. But fundamentally, in the end, you still won't catch and become COVID positive unless you go close to somebody. And if you're in the same vicinity, hence why the people are so keen at the moment to make sure making space and having social distancing is such critical. And that's about seeing how, despite your attributes, the most important thing is what's the current context. Who is it you bump into and who is it you got and copied? And those types of behaviors, whilst they're clearly the case with a virus, are also very much the case with us and human behaviors that are commercially relevant. We all are very instinctively love to copy. We copy it in the way we have attributes to debt. We copy in our choices of brand. We adopt different things we wear, even the hats we choose to put on. And once these interactions take account, you start to have, as a physicist, the things I love are really seeing the phase transitions in behavior. It's where suddenly things flip from one thing to another. Messages can become viral and start to spread on YouTube. And I always at this point encourage people to look up on YouTube for Big Bang Theory cornstarch, because you'll actually see in there some quite fun things that start to happen once you have to take account of the way, in that instance, platelets bump into each other. But the same thing can happen in human behavior. So you suddenly get strings of behavior as things ripple out in rather uncontrolled ways. And so understanding that complexity theory in a context of large amounts of data enables us to operate in different ways. And I say, I love the theory, but you probably are more interested in the fact that actually when you start to see these things, you can start to see that actually they impact ROI percentage by 200 to 300%. They can have quite enormous dramatic changes rather than just incremental changes in a response rate.
Okay, thanks, Tim. That's really interesting, and I remember the Big Bang episode you're talking about there. So that's something I will send a link round to people afterwards. But moving from theory into practice, can you elaborate on the challenges business have adopting the use of some of the data sets we've been talking about when you throw in governance, regulatory compliance, things like oversight, so GDPR, maybe FCA regulations or other government regulations? So it'd be great. That's obviously a big concern for everyone here. So,
so the first thing is if you like technical, as you've already alluded to, you have to start to move from a standard SQL structure, which is designed really to be a list of attributes and deal with everybody in isolation, to using a graph structure, which is actually designed to try and join things together and enable you to follow these routes. So there's the technical elements that you need to look at, but there's also the as you say, the governance things, and they're actually this complexity theory has some benefits. So where if you traditionally look at the way, for example, GDPR and FCA and all those regulatory things, what you do at the same time preserve privacy, you know the individuals within it, because you can just identify the groups on a larger scale, which enables you to work in that anonymized location, but look at the halo effect that the communications are doing. So you can actually think about how you might put a poster in a location. You might send an email to that sort of location and send some display ads for when the person goes online, and those things end up harmonized with each other, and that's part of what creates that ripple around the place where people are talking about you. So there's some really great benefits of thinking in this way that help overcome some of the challenges that have been written into the regulations, particularly the anonymization that takes place. Does that help? I hope it does.
Yes, no, absolutely. That completely answers the question. Thanks. So I'll move on to Julian in a minute. I appreciate you being there patient in the background, so thank you. But George, just wondering, from your perspective, Synetech perspective, and your customer examples, what do you see as the biggest challenges, to begin leveraging data science and AI?
I think Tim touched on it there when he was talking. It's about the data. There's just so much different types and sources of data. To bring that all together into effectively a common language is not really natural. Is probably not the right word, but it's not what computer databases, systems, even our minds are not really designed to think that way. I mean, if you look at around there, he's got a library, right? Look how he's put his books. He's put them all together. He likes the colors together. He likes the topics together. I assume that is your real library, Tim, and not just a background. That is okay. I think that databases are exactly the same. And so when you're taking, let's say, a record that's coming from a bank, which has got 150 fields per record, and then you want to somehow translate it into the same language as, let's say, some sentiment data that you're bringing in off of Twitter, marrying those two up to be a common language for your business is the trickiest bit.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you there, George. And Julian, at this point, it would be great to get your input. So probably worth you doing a little intro of yourself. I did a bad one at the beginning. When
I heard you. Unfortunately, you couldn't hear me, unfortunately, at the time.
Okay.
So, I don't know, you did an admirable job. So, yeah, ESET's one of the top 4 global cybersecurity companies operating across both the consumer and the B2B space. This whole project relating to this topic came about because ESET, although we are one of the top 4, we actually have in the UK market very low brand awareness. So Tim and I have worked together for a number of years, and faced with this challenge of low brand awareness and relatively low market share in the UK, although much bigger and more substantial in other territories, I spoke to Tim and said, look, what can we do with some of your thinking relating to the use of the big data that we have as an organisation. And success history and viewing network, the correlations in relation to geography of the way that people are interacting with each other when it comes to advocacy and purchase of our software. And we did indeed, or Tim and his team did indeed find that there was in fact a giant component or neighborhood network theory effect. There's a number of names that's used to describe this particular aspect and theory, was in existence, and that we had the opportunity to harness that through very targeted communications, and also start to look at creating mimic audiences within specific targeted geographies in order that we could build this peer-to-peer advocacy effect. So in other words, rather than us having to spend huge amounts of money on above-the-line brand building activity, we would start to use our existing customers and the relationships they had with other individuals and businesses within their local communities to start doing that work for us and building that brand awareness and that advocacy. So we've been working on this project now for approximately a year, just under a year, and the initial results are successful in the increase we've seen in media efficiency, and that's the measurement we're really using at the moment, although there is a brand awareness study that's currently underway at the moment. But just to give a couple of highlights, in terms of a control area geographically versus a neighborhood network effect area where we saw there was an influence, we've seen an uplift in media efficiency of over 30%. It's astounding considering the fact that this has been such obviously a small pilot trial in terms of the media spend at the moment. So, we know we currently sit roughly in terms of brand awareness at 8% at the moment. If we carry on with this process and we roll it out nationally, the effect when Tim and team have worked it through we should have achieved in excess of 70% brand awareness within a period of 4 to 5 years. And that's with no incremental media spend. It's all about increasing the efficiency of what you've got by targeting the people who are going to spread the message on your behalf. So it's so far proved to be a very, very potentially successful project.
Wow, fantastic. That's great. And what practical day-to-day changes were you able to make into the business as a result of this? So how has it actually impacted your day-to-day role, as it were?
How has it impacted the day-to-day role? So in terms of working with our digital media agency, that was quite an interesting initial challenge to get them to buy into this concept, because it tended to sort of really go against many of the ideas, thoughts and practices that they had worked with previously. But once we instructed them to just play along and they actually started to see the effects within the test area, then all of a sudden they became incredibly interested with this. And I know that Tim and the team have had conversations now with this said global media agency about how it could be used in other ways within their portfolios. So having been non-believers at the outset, they suddenly, when they saw the results, became believers. So getting your existing media buying infrastructure, or our existing media buying infrastructure in place, was just a case of persuasion. There's also been quite a few hearts and minds to win internally within the organization, because there is an element of, if it seems too good to be true, is it too good to be true? So, the proof of the pudding, as they say, is in the numbers. And thankfully, we've proven that the numbers are actually moving in the right direction.
Fantastic. No, that's great. Thanks for that. That's fantastic reference there. And just moving the topic on to a slightly different area of it. Gary, you and I were speaking last week about R&D tax benefits and the benefits AI exploration can actually bring to a business as people are able to claim money back and things. I appreciate you're not a tax expert, but if you can just give some overview and detail here, that would be fantastic.
Great. So there's two ways to consume any service. You either you take it as a SaaS type solution, which obviously the Cinetech and Luminix partnership can do. Alternatively, you can actually build and develop yourself, which obviously we can assist and help you with. The benefit of that, particularly if you're looking to say, look, we work in a particular field, finance is a good example, where people want to actually do things that currently aren't possible today. There's some really good tax benefits. So anything you do on research and development, you can claim up to 180% back. Naturally, you've already put the caveat in that I'm not a tax consultant, so I can't offer advice. But if you Google R&D tax credits, you can see that there are some really good tax incentives that will actually make this cost neutral, if not beneficial to your business. The whole point is that if someone adopts this as a strategy, and really thinks hard about data, there's a whole wealth of internal and external data that we've said today that if you have at your fingertips, can make difference in your industry, then that research and development is really beneficial. But like I say, that's you'd have to. That's why we work with people on the strategy as well as sales and marketing to know whether it's beneficial. And we've worked with global shipping companies where they've wanted to know predictive models of cargo vessels hitting port before any other ship broker, because therefore they can make deals, as well as then financial companies on detection of fraud analysis, sentiment analysis, those type of things. So there's a whole raft of areas that actually you can use research and development, and it can be really beneficial. But at the same time, it's got to be pivotal to your business, because otherwise it's better to consume it as a service. So.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Gary. Will, just a reminder, we are taking questions. So I see we have a couple already. So if anyone has any more questions, then please do ask them. But before we go on to the questions, there is a question we've had actually at the last couple of events. So I'll pose this one to George. So it's basically, we had our Gentex speak. We ran an event on a similar topic back in January when we were allowed to meet each other in person. So back at the Gherkin, we had one of the co-CEOs of our Gentex. So perhaps you can just give a high-level overview of what we did for those guys and the benefits they got from it.
Sure. So Gentex are a deliverable FX company. So I guess there's if we sort of link it back to the previous sort of what our customers are doing, they very much followed the pattern. So with most regulated companies, there's a lot of everything has to be recorded. Calls need to be recorded. There's a lot of documents being generated. A lot of emails going back and forth. And then there's loads of alternative data sources, whether it's Company House, LinkedIn, due diligence, Twitter, all those kind of great platforms. So it was about bringing those sort of disparate pieces of data and data sources together, transforming them into a standardized and usable format, which we could interpret to get actionable insights, really. So it basically resulted in, okay, we know what actions the compliance team needs to take in order to make sure someone is onboarded properly and the anti-money laundering checks are being done in a thorough manner, which need to be repeated every year. We know what we need to do to retain our customers. We know where to go and look for new customers, which kind of in that data gets distilled into decisions and actions, which can then be distributed through the team via software. And then everyone really knows what they're doing, and the decisions and the actions are all based pretty much on the data. I think that we had some very good results. I wouldn't say it was a test sort of pilot project. It's something that is still ongoing and now part of the DNA. But I will say that in the last 12 months, their turnover is more than doubled, and they're now listed on the stock exchange. So it's clearly working for them.
Fantastic. Thanks, George. See, we've got a few questions in, so I'll just take them in order. So the first one, which I'll pass to you, Tim, if that's okay. Basically, sounds great, but where do I begin? I assume that's meant to say for context, they want to run a pilot with no idea where to begin and how to start on the journey, really.
Oh, well, my advice is always start with the things that are most important to you. Don't bend your own context to fit some perceived requirement of AI. If AI and analytics is worth its salt, it will solve your problems, and set that as the challenge to the people who want to help you do it, and say, these are the things that keep me awake at night. How's AI, data science, machine learning going to help me solve those problems? And then it's their problem to solve how they're going to convince you, because that's where it can really deliver value.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for that. Very good advice.
Andrew,
and the next, yes?
I was just going to add in to Tim's point, if that's all right, because I think
of course,
he answered it really well, is that it's all about the art of the possible. And, it is that consultation, that engagement that's actually really important, because if you can say what the problem is, the goal of any business and partnership like Synetec and Luminix is actually to show you the art of the possible, because a lot of the people and the projects we've done, we simply didn't know the answer until we started it, and actually it comes more relevant as you go through the project piece to say, that really is going to make a difference in my business to these people that is critical for the project. So engagement is definitely the first part.
Okay, fantastic. And then as Tim said, actually what's your key business problem? How can we use it to solve that? Let's not make up a random problem over there, because that's no value to anyone. Okay, fantastic. And the next question, a very well-named gentleman called Andrew. They're a high-value but low-volume business. How will this apply? I guess we've talked about more transactional and higher volume. So how can other business, an insurance company, how can they use this type of thing to help them?
Oh, I really like this question because it's where having a statistical background and being science-led rather than data science-led comes to a fore. Because lots of people who've only done data science can't do anything until they've got a shed load of data. Whereas if you've been trained as a statistician and a scientist, you start to address things early on. And actually, what's happening right this minute at the moment, I'm involved in some projects to try and understand the propagation, particularly of testing in the aviation industry at the moment. And they were in a similar situation. It's all about managing risk, like the insurance stand problem and the behavior, construct models, and initially then develop simulations to create the data, which is valuable.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Tim. Despite disappearing from screen, I did catch it all. Final question for you, Julian. So I guess what the person's asking, you obviously said you saw 30-40% increase in responses to online advertising, but what was that when you factor in the Lumi or the investment in data science, and how do you expect to extrapolate out when you roll out across the territory?
Okay, so I'm obviously not going to give away any actual numbers in terms of fiscal numbers here, but the investment in the data science project represented approximately 2% of what we spend on online media on an annual basis. The start point in terms of the measurement that we use is my target is always to achieve a minimum of a 2.0 ROAS, which is return on advertising spend with any online media activity you do. So when you factor in the fact that we've actually seen our ROAS increase in the targeted geographies by 30%, that's when I described increase in media efficiency, and you factor in the fact that the cost of the data science project, and this will be on an ongoing basis, I would suggest is about 2 to 2.5% on media spend, because you need to keep everything updated, etc., and in element. But the other thing that's important about it is the fact that it's not just about pure ROI for us. As I said, one of our objectives at the outset was to combat this issue of extremely low brand awareness. Now, we could have chucked millions of pounds at above-the-line advertising and actually achieved some sort of brand awareness. But what we were after was actually trying to create the right type of brand awareness driven by advocacy. And so this is a methodology that allows us to do that, because you're harnessing people's own admiration for your products and your service and using them to become your mouthpiece, voice piece out to the marketplace. So on both fronts, in terms of ROI, unquestionable positive ROI, and in terms of how it's going to affect our spend moving forward, as I say, I don't anticipate any great increases in marketing budget, but the fact that you're seeing this exponential effect of the network neighborhood effect improving your activities and your efficiency, we will continue to operate on the same spend levels but increase efficiency moving forward at the same time as building that brand awareness.
Fantastic, thank you. That's absolutely fantastic. And we don't have any more questions. We'll let everyone go in a minute. Just to say, I will be sending an email after. Oh, apologies. Sorry, we have a question through from Byron, so we'll just address this. So should we be concerned with the ICO, for instance, recommending that algorithms used by organizations should be validated for bias? Does anyone have a point of view on that? I'll let you read it yourselves on there.
I'd love to take it, but it's got to be Tim.
I've got to congratulate the team, the audience today on coming up with some really great questions, because this is one element that I'm really passionate about how you do generate AI that is validated and meaningful and appropriately biased, or safely biased is probably a better word. And in the end, what's important is that and it goes back to what I was saying right at the beginning about Doug's passion about making sure you're using talented people inside these processes. And that my analogy is that actually, if you can give anybody a chisel and they can. And some people will just create a pile of rubble with their hammer, and others will create a statue of David. And these tools, the AI tools, can be very dangerous, and these are examples of where they are. So you need to make sure the tools are put in the right hands, so that you don't create these distortions. And as I say, at the moment, the key thing is to make sure you don't have a bad algorithm like someone did for the schools, and you generate good algorithms in terms of the quarantining in airports. As a little aside, I was instructed when we were discussing this with the various government and airport authorities, no longer at the moment to call what I'm doing an algorithm, because algorithms at the moment have got very bad press from what happened with the debacle in schools. But as I say, good algorithms are really effective. Bad algorithms can be terrible. So watch and learn, if you like. Great question.
Okay, so it's about quality, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. So thanks for that question there. And if we don't have any more, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. I will follow up, send you all a thank you email. There'll be a short feedback form on there. It'd be great if you can complete it, because we always like to get feedback, see how we can improve the events going forward. I'll also include those the analytics adoption curve and link to the Big Bang Theory clip that Gary and Tim talked about, just further reading, and also further details on the actionable insight service I mentioned 45 minutes ago now, back at the beginning of this webinar. But thank you all for your time.